September 17, 1944, 13:30 hours, 30,000 feet above the Dutch countryside. You're crammed inside a C-47 Dakota with 43 other paratroopers, and the metallic clatter of submachine guns banging against each other fills the fuselage. Sergeant James Jimmy Clemenson of the 2nd Parachute Battalion holds his STEN Mark V like it's a deformed child. Crude tubes welded together, finish so rough it could cut your hands. The Germans called them Poppenmacher for their distinctive pop-pop-pop sound. But the cruelest nickname came from Wehrmacht officers who captured them, Klempner Albtraum, the plumber's nightmare. In 9 days, these despised, ridiculed weapons would fire 5 million rounds in the most desperate battle British airborne forces ever fought. The red light flashes. Stand up, hook up. Your STEN catches on the static line, and you wonder if this piece of plumbing will actually work when you need it. The joke among the lads was that STEN stood for shoots 10 enemies nearby, if you were lucky. If you weren't, it might shoot you instead. The green light. Door opens. Dutch air rushes in at 120 miles per hour. Clemenson jumps first, his 3 STENs strapped to his body, making him look like a traveling arms dealer. What nobody in that plane knew was that their ugly little submachine guns were about to rewrite the rules of urban warfare. Before I tell you how these plumber's nightmares became the unlikely heroes of Operation Market Garden, comment down below where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you won't want to miss how a 2-pound gun that looked like scrap metal ended up terrifying the Waffen-SS. The problem started in spring 1941, and it wasn't German bullets killing British soldiers, it was mathematics. Dunkirk had been a miracle of evacuation, but a catastrophe of equipment. The British Expeditionary Force left behind 90% of their weapons on French beaches. Entire divisions came home with nothing but the shirts on their backs. The numbers were catastrophic. 2,472 guns, 63,879 vehicles, 20,548 motorcycles, and virtually every automatic weapon the British Army possessed. Gone. The situation with submachine guns was particularly desperate. The Thompson submachine gun, that beautiful American gangster weapon you've seen in every World War II movie, cost £70 in 1941 money. Adjusted for inflation, that's about $4,000 today. For one gun. The British were buying them from America, competing with their own Lend-Lease shipments, and German U-boats were sending half of them to the bottom of the Atlantic. Production rate at the Royal Ordnance factories? 300 Thompsons per month. The Germans? They were stamping out 3,000 MP40s monthly at 1/6 the cost. Major Reginald Shepherd did the calculation in his office at Enfield in December 1940. At current production rates, to equip just the Home Guard with submachine guns would take until 2079. The war would be over for a century before Britain had enough automatic weapons. We're sending boys with Lee Enfield rifles from 1907 to fight Germans with Schmeissers, he wrote in his diary. It's not warfare, it's murder by mathematics. The standard British infantry section in 1941 had 8 men, 1 Bren gun, 7 rifles. The German squad? 2 MG-34 machine guns and every 3rd man carrying an MP40. In close combat, urban fighting, the kind everyone knew was coming when the Allies returned to Europe, British soldiers would be overwhelmed. The manual said, maintain fire discipline, make every shot count. The reality was Germans could spray hundreds of rounds while a British soldier worked his bolt action. The Thompson was a magnificent weapon, weighing 10.8 pounds empty, firing .45 ACP rounds at 700 rounds per minute, accurate to 160 yards. General George Patton called it the greatest battle implement ever devised. It had beautiful walnut furniture, precisely machined parts, a finish you could shave in. The M1928A1 model had 119 separate components, each requiring skilled machinists to produce. Birmingham Small Arms could make 3 per day with their entire workforce, 3 guns while the Wehrmacht conquered Europe. You have to understand the institutional thinking of 1940s British ordnance. Weapons were supposed to last decades. The Brown Bess musket had served for 150 years. Lee Enfield rifles from the Boer War were still in service. Every gun was expected to fire tens of thousands of rounds, be passed down through generations of soldiers, maintained in perfect working order. The idea of a disposable weapon? Heresy. A gun that might break after a single battle? Unthinkable. The cottage industry of British gun-making was legendary. Master craftsmen in Birmingham had been making firearms since the English Civil War. Each weapon was a work of art. Engraved receivers, hand-fitted parts, tolerances measured in thousandths of inches. The guild system meant apprentices spent 7 years learning their trade.
These men built guns like Swiss watches. The thought of making a gun from plumbing supplies was an insult to 3 centuries of tradition. Meanwhile, resistance movements across occupied Europe were desperate for weapons. The Special Operations Executive was dropping supplies to French resistance, Polish Home Army, Norwegian commandos. They needed simple weapons that could be assembled by school teachers and shopkeepers in basements. Weapons that could be hidden in pieces, buried in gardens, assembled in minutes. The Thompson, magnificent as it was useless for this. Too complex, too expensive, too American. The pressure was mounting daily. Churchill himself reviewed production figures every week, his margin notes increasingly frustrated. "Where are my automatic weapons?" scrawled across a December 1940 report. "The Hun has millions. We have hundreds. This is intolerable." The War Cabinet discussed buying from anyone, Swiss, Swedish, even captured Italian weapons, anything to arm British soldiers with more than glorified hunting rifles from their grandfather's war. The breaking point came after the Battle of France. Survivor reports were unanimous. German infantry tactics depended on overwhelming firepower at close range. Storm into a building, spray every room with automatic fire, move on. British tactics still emphasized aimed shots, fire discipline, conserving ammunition. Noble ideas that meant nothing when 6 Germans burst through your door firing MP40s. The kill ratios were horrifying. In urban combat, Germans were achieving 4-to-1 superiority simply through volume of fire. Lord Beaverbrook, Minister of Aircraft Production, had shown it was possible to revolutionize manufacturing. Spitfire production increased 400% by throwing out traditional methods. He converted furniture factories to making aircraft parts, had housewives assembling instruments, used bus depots as assembly plants. If you could build Spitfires in a circus tent, his actual words, why not guns in a garage? The old guard at Woolwich Arsenal nearly had apoplexy. Aircraft are not firearms, Minister. Lives depend on precision. The Commonwealth couldn't help much either. Australia was fighting Japan, Canada building their own equipment, India struggling to arm 1 million new recruits. South Africa was making Lee Enfields as fast as possible, 12 per day. New Zealand contributed what they could, mostly agricultural equipment converted to military use. The empire that had ruled the world suddenly couldn't produce enough guns to defend itself. Major Reginald Shepherd was nobody's idea of a military genius. At 47, he was older than most majors, with a slight paunch and thinning hair that he combed over optimistically. Before the war, he'd been chief engineer at Birmingham Small Arms, designing motorcycles. The 1938 BSA Gold Star was his baby, a beautiful machine that could do 100 miles per hour. Shepherd understood metal, understood mass production, understood that perfection was the enemy of good enough. On weekends, he played saxophone badly in Birmingham pubs, collecting half-crowns in his hat. December 3, 1940, Shepherd was commissioned directly as a major in the Royal Army Ordnance Corps. Not because anyone thought he was brilliant, but because he was the only senior engineer who hadn't been grabbed by aircraft production. His assignment to the Royal Small Arms Factory at Enfield came with a note. "This man understands production. Make him useful." The colonel at Enfield took one look at this middle-aged motorcycle engineer and stuck him in the worst office, dealing with emergency expedients.
The captured MP-40 arrived on Shepherd's desk December 15, 1940, still covered in North African sand. The orders were simple and impossible. Copy this, make it cheaper, make thousands. Shepherd spent 3 days disassembling and reassembling the German weapon. He timed himself, counted parts, weighed components. Then he did something no properly trained weapons engineer would do. He started throwing parts away. Recoil buffer? Don't need it. Adjustable sights? Fixed will do. Selective fire? Automatic only. Wooden stock? Steel tube is cheaper. His notebook from that week survived, filled with crossed-out diagrams and calculations. Next to the barrel specification, water pipe. Next to the trigger group, 1 spring instead of 3. His conclusion, circled 3 times, a gun only needs to work once to kill someone. The revelation came when Shepherd was fixing his office radiator. The pipe fitting, a simple pressed steel tube, looked exactly like a gun barrel. Not rifled, not precisely machined, just a tube. He measured it, 9 millimeters internal diameter, the same as the MP-40. That night, he took the radiator apart and built his first prototype using plumbing supplies from the Enfield maintenance shed. It was ugly as sin, but when he tested it at midnight in the empty range, it fired 32 rounds without stopping. Shepherd's design philosophy was heretical. Every principle of British weapons manufacturing he inverted. Instead of preventing jams, make clearing them instant. Instead of precision manufacturing, use loose tolerances that any workshop could achieve.
Instead of expensive alloys, use whatever steel was available. Instead of skilled craftsmen, design for production by clerks and shopgirls, his actual words. The gun didn't have to last forever. It had to last long enough. The mathematics were beautiful in their simplicity. A Thompson, 119 parts, 50 man-hours labor, 70 pounds. Shepherd's design, 47 parts, 5 man-hours, 2 pounds 10. You could make 33 of his guns for the price of 1 Thompson. They might last 1/10 as long, but you'd have 33 times as many. In war, quantity has a quality all its own. Stalin said that, but Shepherd proved it. His notebook sketches looked like a child's drawing. A tube for a barrel, a tube for a receiver, a spring, a bolt, a trigger. No elegance, no beauty, nothing that would make a craftsman proud. But overlaid on the sketch were production figures. Birmingham, 1,000 per week. Manchester, 1,500 per week. Any bicycle shop, 50 per week. He wasn't designing a gun, he was designing a production system. The stroke of genius was the magazine. Instead of complex feed lips machined to precise angles, Shepherd used a simple pressed steel box with a single curve. It would jam more often, but clearing it took 2 seconds. The entire gun could be stripped to components in 30 seconds, reassembled in 45. No tools required. Any soldier, no matter how panicked, could fix it in the dark. Christmas Eve 1940, Shepherd worked alone in his office, jazz playing on his wireless. He'd built 3 prototypes, each uglier than the last, each cheaper to produce. The final design could be made with equipment found in any garage: a drill press, a welding torch, basic metalworking tools. He typed his proposal on his own typewriter, since the secretaries had gone home. Emergency weapon for immediate production. He knew it was revolutionary. He also knew they'd hate it. The first person to see Shepherd's prototype was Colonel George Herbert, Director of Weapons Development. Herbert was old school, Woolwich Arsenal, trained at Sandhurst, wounded at Passchendaele, believed in doing things properly. He picked up Shepherd's creation, turned it over, set it down. "Major, this appears to be constructed from plumbing supplies." Shepherd nodded. Herbert continued, "It looks like something a drunken plumber might produce in his shed." Shepherd nodded again. "Precisely, sir. Any drunken plumber in Britain could make one." January 8, 1941, first official demonstration. Shepherd had refined the design, adding a skeletal stock, improving the trigger, but it still looked like scrap metal welded by a blind man. The review board assembled: 3 generals, 2 colonels, representatives from the War Office. Shepherd fired 500 rounds continuously,
The gun glowed red-hot, the wooden foregrip caught fire, but it kept shooting. Gentlemen, it's not pretty, but it works. The reaction was swift and brutal. General Andrew Thorne: "This is an insult to British craftsmanship." Colonel Davies Wright: "I wouldn't give this to the Home Guard." The man from Woolwich Arsenal: "It violates every principle of weapons design we hold sacred." The nickname started that day, the stench gun. Someone else called it the Woolwich War, ugly, cheap, but does the job. The formal rejection came January 12th. While appreciating Major Shepherd's enthusiasm, the board finds the proposed weapon unsuitable for British forces. Recommend continuation of Thompson procurement. Shepherd was told to return to motorcycle design. He refused, technically insubordination. Instead, he built 20 prototypes using his own money, hiring laid-off Birmingham craftsmen, working nights and weekends. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Harold Turpin, a draftsman at Enfield, had been secretly helping Shepherd. Turpin's improvement was brilliant, a side-mounted magazine that allowed the gun to be fired prone. Together, they refined the design, making it even simpler. The name came from their collaboration, STEN, Shepherd, Turpin, Enfield. Though soldiers would later say it stood for shoots 10 enemies nearby, or more commonly, stupid toy essentially nasty. Churchill tested one personally, January 28, 1941. The Prime Minister, cigar clenched in teeth, fired a full magazine at the Chequers range. The gun jammed twice. Churchill cleared it himself, kept firing. His comment: "Ugly as sin, but if it kills Germans, I'll take 1,000,000. Still, the military establishment resisted. Weapons had standards, traditions, dignity. This thing had none of those. February brought crisis. The Luftwaffe was specifically targeting arms factories. Birmingham Small Arms was hit twice. Royal Ordnance Nottingham burned for 3 days. Thompson shipments from America: U-boats sank 2 convoys carrying 10,000 guns. The mathematics Shepherd had calculated were proving optimistic. Britain wasn't slowly losing the arms race, it was being crushed. Something had to give. The order finally came March 15, 1941. Not from the military, but from Lord Beaverbrook himself. Produce 100,000 STEN guns immediately. Cost and appearance irrelevant. Production speed paramount. The military protested.
We are being asked to arm His Majesty's forces with weapons that look like they were made in a prison workshop. Beaverbrook's response was classic. Would the General prefer we arm them with strongly worded letters? Even with approval, resistance continued. Ordnance officers called them Plumber's abortions and tube guns. Training sergeants at Hythe refused to use them initially, claiming they'd destroy morale. The Special Operations Executive, desperate for weapons to drop to resistance movements, called them too crude even for partisans. Everyone wanted Thompsons, Brownings, real weapons. Nobody wanted Shepherd's pressed steel embarrassment. The final approval came with conditions. The STEN would be an emergency expedient only, to be replaced as soon as proper weapons became available. It would be issued to second-line troops, Home Guard, colonial forces. Frontline British soldiers would still get proper weapons. This distinction would last exactly until the first combat units realized the STEN's advantages. But in March 1941, it was still the unwanted stepchild of British ordnance. First production test, April 15, 1941, Enfield Range 7. Lieutenant Harold Steele, chosen because he was expendable, would fire the first 1,000 rounds continuously. The STEN Mark I performed exactly as expected, which is to say badly by conventional standards. It jammed 4 times, overheated constantly. Accuracy was minute of barn door at 50 yards. But it kept shooting. Steele cleared each jam in seconds, resumed firing immediately. The heat test was spectacular. After 500 rounds continuous fire, the barrel glowed cherry red. The wooden furniture, one of the few concessions to traditional gunmaking, caught fire. Steele beat out the flames with his gloves, kept firing. Paint peeled off the receiver, metal expanded, the gun looked like it was melting.
At round 750, the entire weapon was too hot to hold without gloves. Steele wrapped it in his jacket, kept shooting. Round 1000, the gun still worked. Rate of fire, 550 rounds per minute. Slower than Thompson, but fast enough. Effective range, officially 100 yards, realistically 50, practically across a room. Accuracy was measured differently than traditional weapons. Instead of minutes of angle, they used probability of hit on standing man at 50 yards. The STEN achieved 76%, not precision shooting, but good enough for suppressive fire. The Mark II came quickly, May 1941. Shepherd eliminated the wooden furniture entirely. Too expensive, too flammable. The skeleton stock was simplified to bent steel rod. Magazine housing rotated for easier concealment. Cost dropped to £1.95. Production time, 4.5 man-hours. A skilled team could make 12 per day. An unskilled team, trained for 1 week, could make 8. Birmingham toy factories were converting to STEN production. June tests revealed unexpected advantages. The STEN's loose tolerances meant it worked in conditions that jammed precision weapons. Sand, mud, water, the STEN shrugged them off. You could bury one for a week, dig it up, and it would fire. Try that with a Thompson. The simple blowback mechanism meant no gas ports to foul, no complex timing to fail. It was stupid, brutal, and utterly reliable in its unreliability. Interesting discovery. The STEN's signature defect became a feature. The gun fired from an open bolt, which meant it could run away, fire automatically if dropped. Terrifying for safety inspectors, but soldiers learned to use it. Throw a STEN into a room, let it spray randomly, then enter. Completely against regulations, completely effective. The Germans called it terror tactics. British paratroopers called it room clearing. By August 1941, production hit stride. Not in traditional arms factories, but everywhere. Lines Brothers, Britain's largest toy manufacturer, made STENs between teddy bears and model trains. Singer sewing machine plants converted to gun production. A former biscuit factory in Liverpool produced 500 weekly. The distributed production Shepherd envisioned was happening. Even if Germans bombed traditional arsenals, STENs would keep coming. The Mark II-R, Mark II Star, addressed the biggest complaint, accidental discharge. A simple slot cut in the receiver allowed the bolt handle to lock in forward position. Safety on. It added 10 seconds to production, 15 pence to cost. Shepherd fought it, arguing safety was the operator's problem, but lost. Even with the modification, the STEN remained dangerous. Soldiers said it had 2 settings, safe and not bloody likely. Bicycle shops proved perfect for STEN production. They had tube bending equipment, brazing torches, basic machine tools. The government distributed blueprints and materials, shops produced components. Final assembly happened at regional centers. A shop that normally repaired 10 bicycles daily could produce 20 STEN receivers. The owner of Hercules Cycles in Birmingham converted entirely to war production, making 1,000 STENs monthly with a workforce of housewives and teenage boys. Testing evolved to match the weapon's character. Instead of precision shooting at bullseyes, they measured suppression effectiveness. Could the weapon put enough lead down range to keep enemy heads down? The S-10 excelled. One soldier with 3 magazines could dominate a street for 90 seconds. That's 96 rounds, delivered fast, accurate enough to kill anyone stupid enough to show themselves. Cost 18 shillings of ammunition from a 2-pound gun. The accidental discoveries continued. The STEN's barrel was exactly 9mm, matching captured German ammunition. Paratroopers behind enemy lines could use Nazi supplies. The magazine, despite being crude, held 32 rounds versus Thompson's 20 or 30. More bullets per reload meant fewer vulnerable moments. The horizontal magazine? Perfect for firing around corners without exposing yourself. Every defect had an unexpected benefit. September 17, 1944, 13:47 hours. Operation Market Garden was 7 minutes old when Sergeant Clemenson's stick jumped over Drop Zone X-ray near Wolfhays, 7 miles west of Arnhem Bridge. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Largest airborne operation in history, 3.5 divisions dropped behind German lines, capture bridges, hold until armored relief arrives. What could go wrong? Everything, as it turned out, but the STENs would perform beyond anyone's imagination. Clemenson hit the ground hard, his 3 STENs clattering like a sack of pipes. Around him, the 2nd Battalion was assembling in chaos typical of airborne operations. Equipment scattered, units mixed, officers trying to organize their men while under sporadic fire. The first German reaction came from a training battalion stationed nearby, elderly men and boys with Mausers from the Great War. Perfect targets for STEN guns. 13:55, first contact. Private Derek Thompson's section advanced toward Wolf Hayes Railroad Station when machine gun fire erupted from a brick signal house. The MG-42, Hitler's buzzsaw, could fire 1,200 rounds per minute. Thompson's section had 12 STENs between them. They didn't try to match the German guns' range or accuracy. Instead, they got close, using hedgerows and ditches until they were within 40 yards. Then, 12 STENs opened up simultaneously. The noise was incredible. Not the measured tap-tap-tap of rifles or the buzzsaw shriek of the MG-42, but a stuttering mechanical clatter like a dozen typewriters gone insane. The brick signal house disappeared in dust and fragments as 384 rounds hammered it in 20 seconds. The German gun crew didn't die from precision shooting, they died from probability. With that many bullets in a small space, hitting something was inevitable. The advance continued toward Arnhem, but the Germans weren't the pushovers intelligence promised. Instead of second-line occupation troops, the British had dropped virtually on top of 2 SS Panzer Divisions, the 9th Hohenstaufen and 10th Frundsberg, refitting after Normandy. These were veterans, equipped with tanks, assault guns, and most importantly, experience, fighting British and American forces. They knew Allied tactics, Allied weapons. They didn't know the S-10 yet. 1430, Wolf Hayes Village. Lieutenant Michael Dauncey's platoon needed to clear 12 houses along the main street. Traditional method? Careful room-by-room clearing, grenades, covering fire. STEN method? Kick in door, spray magazine through doorway, enter while changing magazines. Crude, wasteful of ammunition, absolutely effective. They cleared all 12 houses in 18 minutes. German after-action reports expressed bewilderment. Enemy appears to have unlimited automatic weapons. The STEN's simplicity proved crucial as the battle intensified. Corporal John Hollington's gun jammed with a ruptured cartridge case. Normally a weapon-killing malfunction. He field-stripped the STEN in 15 seconds, knocked out the case with a stick, reassembled, and was firing again within a minute. Try that with a Thompson or MP40. The loose tolerances that made STENs inaccurate also made them soldier-proof. By evening, 1st Airborne had established a rough perimeter, but ammunition consumption was astronomical. Each paratrooper carried 5 32-round magazines standard. Many carried 10. That's 320 rounds per man, 2,560 rounds per 8-man section. In the first 6 hours, 2nd Battalion alone fired an estimated 85,000 rounds from STEN guns. The distinctive clatter was everywhere, a mechanical rainfall that never stopped. Night brought urban combat in Oosterbeek. Here, the STEN's weaknesses became strengths. Bad accuracy? Irrelevant at 10 feet. Tendency to fire when dropped? Useful for clearing cellars. Cheap construction? Who cared if it broke? Grab another from the supply drop or dead comrade. Sergeant William Eaton went through 4 STENs in one night, each one discarded when damaged, immediately replaced. September 18th, dawn. The Germans counterattacked with armor. Tiger tanks, impervious to small arms, rumbled through British positions. But their accompanying infantry couldn't follow. Every window held a STEN, every doorway, every pile of rubble. The Germans advanced into a hurricane of 9mm rounds. Tank commanders buttoned up, blind, vulnerable to Piats and gammon bombs. The STENs couldn't kill tanks, but they could strip away infantry protection. The room-clearing technique evolved rapidly.
Paratroopers learned the S-10's open-bolt firing meant a half-second delay between trigger pull and first shot. Solution: pull trigger before entering room, sweep gun in arc while entering. STEN swing, they called it. Wasteful, dangerous to friendlies, absolutely terrifying to defenders. You'd hear the gun start firing, know someone was coming, have nowhere to hide from the spray of bullets. Lieutenant Colonel John Frost's 2nd Battalion reached Arnhem Bridge, the operation's primary objective. They held the north end against increasingly desperate German attacks. The bridge approach became a killing ground. German infantry had to advance across open ground into interlocking fields of STEN fire. Frost positioned men in buildings on both sides, creating crossfire zones. Any German entering paid in blood. The numbers were staggering. In the first 48 hours at Arnhem Bridge, Frost's 740 men fired approximately 800,000 rounds from STENs. That's over 1,000 rounds per man, 31,000 magazines, nearly 100 tons of ammunition. The bridge approach was carpeted with brass casings. Germans reported they couldn't advance without slipping on spent shells. The mechanical clatter of STENs never stopped, day or night. SS Sturmbannführer Walter Harzer commanded the 9th SS Reconnaissance Battalion, first unit to respond to the British landing. His initial report to model dismissed the paratroopers, light infantry without heavy weapons. By day 3, his tone changed. Enemy possesses seemingly unlimited automatic weapons. Every soldier appears equipped with multiple machine pistols. Ammunition expenditure suggests industrial-level supply. Request immediate reinforcement. The German confusion was understandable. Wehrmacht doctrine assumed automatic weapons were specialist tools, 1 or 2 per squad. The British were using them like primary weapons, every man a walking machine gun. German intelligence counted muzzle flashes, estimated British strength at 3 times actual. How could 10,000 men produce the firepower of 30,000? They couldn't understand the S-10's combination of simplicity, reliability, and sheer numbers. SS reports describe the psychological effect. Unterscharführer Klaus Wegner, 10th SS. The English have a new tactic. Their machine pistols never stop firing. You cannot raise your head without hearing that distinctive clatter. It sounds like metal rain, constant, everywhere. The Germans nicknamed them Pulpenmacher, the doll maker, for the pop-pop-pop sound, but also Englische Pest, English plague, for how they seemed to multiply. German attempts to counter were futile. They tried artillery, mortars, tank fire, but the paratroopers kept fighting with STENs from rubble. Snipers couldn't operate, too much suppressive fire. Infantry assaults met walls of bullets. The SS brought up Nebelwerfers, 6-barreled rocket launchers, devastating against fixed positions. But STEN-armed paratroopers were mobile, fluid, everywhere and nowhere. The propaganda value was enormous. German soldiers had been told the British were weak, poorly equipped, demoralized after years of defeat. Instead, they faced paratroopers armed like Chicago gangsters spraying bullets with abandon. Letters home from German soldiers expressed bewilderment. They fight like madmen, firing constantly. Their ugly little guns never jam, never stop. We call them plumber's nightmares because they look homemade, but they kill just fine. Model himself, the Wehrmacht's defensive genius, noted in his diary, British automatic weapons production must have increased dramatically. Every paratrooper seems equipped with multiple weapons. They discard damaged ones like empty magazines. He was right about the effect, wrong about the cause. Britain hadn't increased production quality. They'd revolutionized production philosophy, quantity over quality, simple brilliance. The Germans tried capturing STENs for their own use. Initially, they mocked the crude construction. Hauptmann Erich Müller, weapons specialist. This appears to be constructed from automotive parts and plumbing supplies. Any competent machinist would be ashamed. But when they tested them, the tone changed. Remarkably effective despite primitive construction. Rate of fire excellent. Reliability, production cost negligible. Recommend immediate copying. This led to the MP3000, Germany's STEN clone. Even more simplified, even cheaper. Proof the concept worked.
By 1945, Germans were producing their own plumber's nightmares in bombed-out factories. The student had become the teacher, though they never matched British production numbers. Irony, the weapon they mocked in 1944 became their desperation solution in 1945. Resistance movements loved STENs even more than paratroopers. The French resistance received 500,000 by war's end. Drop a container with 20 STENs, 10,000 rounds, and simple instructions. Within hours, a Maquis unit was armed. The gun could be broken into 3 parts: barrel, receiver, stock, hidden separately, assembled in 30 seconds. Perfect for guerrilla warfare. The Polish Home Army manufactured their own STENs in basements, using British blueprints. Błyskawica, lightning, their version was even cruder but worked. Production in occupied Warsaw, under Nazi noses, using stolen materials. During the Warsaw Uprising, Polish-made STENs fought German occupiers street by street. The gun, designed for emergency production, proved perfect for underground manufacturing. Production statistics tell the story. 1941, 100,000 STENs. 1942, 500,000. 1943, 1 million. 1944, 1.2 million.
500,000. Total, 3,750,000 STENs of all marks. Average cost £1.86. Compared to Thompson, 1,500,000 total produced. Average cost $200. Britain produced twice as many guns for 1/20th the total cost. Shepherd's mathematics proved correct. The Mark V, introduced late 1944, represented STEN evolution. Wooden pistol grip and stock, soldiers complained the metal was too cold. Improved sights, though nobody used them. Bayonet lug, psychological value mostly. Cost increased to £2.40, production time to 6 hours. Purists called it putting lipstick on a pig, but soldiers appreciated the small comforts. It remained essentially Shepherd's crude design, just slightly less uncomfortable. Special variants emerged. Mark VI, silenced version for commandos. The suppressor was integral, couldn't be removed, made the gun front-heavy. But it was genuinely quiet, 73 decibels, quieter than modern car engine. Commandos and SOE agents used them for assassination, sabotage, silent killing. The crude STEN became a precision instrument for special operations, though precision remained relative. Training evolved to match the weapon. Instead of traditional marksmanship, instructors taught volume discipline, when to spray, when to conserve. The STEN manual, all 4 pages of it, emphasized clearing jams over accuracy. Your STEN will jam. This is normal. Clear it and continue firing. Compared to the Thompson manual, 48 pages of maintenance procedures. The STEN's manual fit in your pocket, could be read in 5 minutes. Back at Arnhem, the situation deteriorated daily, but STENs kept firing. September 21st, Black Tuesday, the Germans brought up King Tiger tanks, 88mm guns, veteran infantry. The perimeter shrank to a few hundred yards around Oosterbeek Church. Ammunition ran low, but captured German supplies worked perfectly. The 9mm Parabellum round, standard for both sides, meant every dead German provided STEN food. Private James Sims remembered the sound. Constant clattering, like being inside a factory. You'd hear them all night, our STENs answering their MGs. Short bursts, long bursts, sometimes just firing to let them know we were still there. My STEN's barrel turned white hot, paint completely gone, wood grips charred black. Still worked. By day 5, many STENs were held together with wire and hope, but still firing. The house-to-house fighting reached unprecedented intensity. Every building became a fortress, every room a battleground. Germans learned to recognize the STEN's distinctive sound, throw grenades at it. British learned to fire bursts, move, fire again. The STEN's lightweight, 7.5 pounds loaded, meant soldiers could run and gun effectively. Heavy weapons stayed in place. STENs moved constantly. September 24th, the wounded filled every building. Medical supplies exhausted, ammunition critical, but STENs kept defenders fighting. Major Robert Kane won the Victoria Cross destroying tanks, but noted, "The STENs kept Jerry infantry back, gave me clear shots at armor."
Without automatic weapons suppressing German infantry, the anti-tank weapons would have been useless. The cheap gun enabled the expensive weapons. Final statistics from Arnhem. 1st Airborne Division fired approximately 5 million rounds from STEN guns in 9 days. That's 500,000 rounds per day, 21,000 per hour, 350 per minute, every minute for 9 days straight. The Germans fired more. MG-42s had higher rates of fire, but never achieved fire superiority. Every British paratrooper was a machine gunner. Every position was defended by automatic weapons. The withdrawal, Operation Berlin, succeeded partly because of STENs. Covering forces with multiple STENs per man maintained suppressive fire while others escaped across the Rhine. Germans couldn't pursue aggressively, too much firepower from the rearguard. Last man out allegedly threw his jammed STEN at pursuing Germans, final insult from the plumber's nightmare. Of 10,000 who jumped, 2,400 escaped. Without STENs, none might have. After Arnhem, nobody mocked STENs anymore. The weapon that embarrassed officers in 1941 had proven itself in the crucible. Paratroopers, who could have had any weapon, chose STENs for weight and firepower. Special forces, who needed reliability, chose STENs for simplicity. Resistance movements, who needed concealment, chose STENs for size. The ugly duckling had become a swan, still ugly but effective. Market Garden failed strategically. The war didn't end by Christmas 1944. But tactically, the STEN proved revolutionary. Small units with automatic weapons could dominate urban terrain. Volume of fire trumped precision. Simplicity beat sophistication. The lesson wasn't lost on military thinkers. Post-war doctrine emphasized automatic weapons for every soldier, not just specialists. The numbers tell the strategic impact. Britain produced 3,750,000 STENs for approximately $7 million total. That same money would have bought 100,000 Thompsons. Those extra 3,650,000 automatic weapons armed resistance movements, Commonwealth forces, emergency militias. Every STEN freed foreign exchange for aircraft, tanks, ships. Shepherd's cheap gun subsidized the expensive war. German resources diverted to counter STENs were enormous. Extra ammunition production, medical services for wounded, reinforcements for quiet sectors suddenly active with resistance attacks.
The Wehrmacht estimated 20% of occupation forces were tied down by STEN-armed partisans. That's 500,000 soldiers not fighting in Normandy or the Eastern Front. The plumber's nightmare became Germany's strategic migraine. Churchill, who initially called STENs shameful, admitted in 1945, "The STEN gun, hideous though it appears, contributed more to victory than many more celebrated weapons. It armed the forces of liberation from Norway to Yugoslavia. Every burst fired by a French maquisard or Polish patriot was British democracy defending itself with pressed steel and determination." Classic Churchill, turning embarrassment into triumph through rhetoric. Soviet observers studied the STEN carefully. Marshal Zhukov noted, "British showed mass production of adequate weapons beats limited production of perfect ones. This influenced AK-47 development, simple, reliable, manufacturable anywhere." Mikhail Kalashnikov admitted studying STEN production methods, though his design was mechanically different. The STEN's philosophy, not mechanism, influenced history's most produced weapon. The STEN principle infected military thinking globally. Israel's Uzi, designed by Major Uziel Gal, used STEN-style simplicity. The Swedish K, the Mach-10, countless others followed Shepherd's philosophy. Make it simple, make it work, make thousands. Modern doctrine of good enough equipment in massive quantities traces directly to the STEN's success. Perfect is the enemy of good enough. Korea, 1950. British forces, theoretically re-equipped with modern weapons, brought STENs anyway. In frozen Korean mountains, STENs worked when precision weapons froze. Malaya, 1948 to 1960. Jungle warfare against communist insurgents, STENs proved perfect for ambush combat. Suez, 1956. Paratroopers jumping into port side carried STENs, 35 years after invention. The emergency expedient had become permanent equipment.
Special Air Service retained STENs into the 1960s for specific operations. The silenced Mark VI remained in SAS inventory until replaced by modern suppressors. Rhodesian Bush War, 1970s. Modified STENs armed both sides. Even today, simplified submachine guns following STEN principles serve in conflicts worldwide. The design is obsolete, the philosophy remains relevant. Vietnam showed the concept's evolution. American M16s, precision weapons, failed in jungle conditions. Viet Cong's crude weapons, often homemade, worked reliably. The lesson of quantity, simplicity, and good enough was relearned. Modern American military doctrine emphasizes reliability over precision, influenced by Vietnam, influenced by Korea, influenced ultimately by the STEN success at Arnhem. Modern urban warfare training emphasizes volume of fire, multiple weapons per soldier, exactly what STENs pioneered. Every American soldier in Iraq carried at minimum an M4 automatic carbine. Many carried two weapons. The concept of disposable weapons, unthinkable in 1940, is now standard. AT-4 anti-tank rockets, fired once, discarded. The STEN normalized disposability in military equipment. 3D printing revolutionizes manufacturing but follows STEN principles. Distributed production, simplified design, adequate performance. The FGC-9, a 3D printed gun designed for resistance movements, is essentially a modern STEN. Built anywhere, simple materials, effective enough. Shepherd's vision of guns made in garages is now reality, for better or worse. Technology changes, principles endure. Commercial firearms manufacturing adopted STEN lessons. Glock pistols, ugly, polymer, revolutionary. Perfection through simplicity, not complexity. High-point carbines, cheapest guns in America, scorned by enthusiasts, bought by millions. They work adequately, cost little, fulfill STEN philosophy. The market proved Shepherd right. Many prefer 10 cheap guns to 1 expensive gun. Video games immortalize the STEN's character. Call of Duty, Medal of Honor, Battlefield all feature STENs with appropriate characteristics. High fire rate, low accuracy, prone to jamming, but quick to reload. Younger generations know the STEN through gaming, understand its nature intuitively. The ugly gun became gaming icon, teaching its lessons through entertainment. Museums worldwide display STENs, usually apologetically. Emergency wartime production, the placards read, replaced as soon as possible. But veterans visiting stop longest at STEN displays. They remember the weight, the smell of oil and cordite, the distinctive clatter. Some request to hold them, illegal usually, but sometimes allowed. Old hands remember field stripping blindfolded, clearing jams under fire, trusting their lives to pressed steel. Major Reginald Shepherd, the motorcycle engineer who revolutionized warfare, received modest recognition. Order of the British Empire, 1946, minor pension, returned to motorcycle design. BSA brought him back, designed the legendary Bantam, another simple, cheap, effective machine. He died in 1967, aged 73. Obituary mentioning motorcycles, not guns. Typical British understatement for a man who helped win the war. Harold Turpin, co-designer, remained at Enfield until retirement. Never famous, rarely credited, the draftsman who improved Shepherd's design lived quietly. His contribution, the side-mounted magazine that enabled prone firing, saved countless lives. He died in 1974, local newspaper noting only former civil servant. The men who designed the Empire's salvation died in obscurity. Sergeant James Clemenson survived Arnhem, one of 2,400 who escaped. Returned to Birmingham, became a school teacher, never spoke about the war. His grandson found 3 STEN magazines in the attic after he died in 2003, still loaded.
Testament to the paratrooper who jumped with 3 ugly guns and fought the Waffen-SS to a standstill. Ordinary men, extraordinary circumstances, adequate weapons. Lieutenant Colonel Frost, hero of Arnhem Bridge, wrote in his memoirs, "The STEN was detested in training, beloved in combat. It never won shooting competitions, but won firefights. Ugly as sin, crude as a club,
utterly reliable in its unreliability. We cursed it daily and blessed it when bullets flew. Perfect summary from a man who knew the difference between parade ground polish and battlefield performance. Private Derek Thompson, who cleared wolf haze with STEN fire, became a plumber after the war. Ironic profession for a man who fought with plumber's nightmares. Interviewed in 1994, 50th anniversary. Everyone wants to talk about heroes and glory. I remember noise, fear, and thank God for ugly little guns that kept firing when everything else failed. He kept a deactivated STEN on his mantle, conversation piece that saved his life. The last British military STENs were officially withdrawn in 1960, replaced by Sterling submachine guns, essentially improved STENs. But they never really disappeared. Police evidence lockers worldwide contain STENs from crimes, rebellions, conflicts. Simple to copy, impossible to eradicate, they persist like mechanical cockroaches. In 2013, Syrian rebels were photographed with homemade STENs. Shepherd's design, still fighting 70 years later. Spring 1940, the Royal Air Force had a problem killing pilots faster than German bullets. The solution came not from traditional arsenals or master craftsmen, but from a middle-aged motorcycle engineer who understood a fundamental truth. In war, perfect is the enemy of good enough. The weapon they mocked as the plumber's nightmare, that crude assemblage of tubes and springs that offended every principle of British craftsmanship, fired 5 million rounds at Arnhem and proved that quantity, indeed, has a quality all its own. Today, standing in the Airborne Museum at Oosterbeek, you can see them. STENs, still ugly, displayed alongside German weapons that cost 20 times as much. The museum guides, mostly Dutch volunteers, tell visitors about the 9 days in September when paratroopers with pressed steel guns held off SS Panzer Divisions. They don't mention the embarrassment, the institutional resistance, the mockery. They mention the 5 million rounds, the mechanical clatter that never stopped, the plumber's nightmare that became Germans' waking terror. The Germans called them Klempner-Albtraum and meant it as an insult. History remembers them as the guns that armed democracy when democracy couldn't afford anything better. 3 pounds of steel tube, 1 spring, and the wisdom to know that an ugly gun that works is beautiful to the soldier whose life depends on it. Major Shepherd built more than a gun. He built proof that innovation under pressure, no matter how crude, beats tradition under any circumstances. The plumber's nightmare wasn't pretty, but it was exactly what Britain needed, exactly when they needed it, exactly as cheap as it had to be.